an an old Irish tale about Mary Culhane. Now Mary was a young lass, and she lived with her family in a wee cottage way on the outskirts of a small town. Now her father happened to be the town grave digger, and the cemetery was located between their house and the town. Well, one evening after her father came home from work, he realized that he had left his blackthorn walking stick at the side of a fresh dug grave. "Oh," he said, "it was a prize shillelagh, and it belonged to my father. I fear someone will take it during the night." Now the children, they looked at one another and then down at their plates, and they feared the haunted tombs. Well, all except Mary. She jumped up and she said, "I'll get it for you, Father." And she was out the door before anyone could stop her. It took her no time at all to get to that graveyard, and less time to spot the walking stick. As she approached it, she heard a voice. "Forget the blackthorn, Mary Culhane, and get me out of this hole." Well, now she was scared to death. She wanted to run away, but she was frozen. She could not move. And then a power came over her. Instead of running, it pulled her closer to the grave until she was peering down into it. "Get me out of this hole." And to her amazement, this thing, this corpse, climbed right out of the grave and grabbed her by the leg. He climbed right up onto her back, and he pointed towards the town. Now Mary was dazed. She could not believe that this was happening to her. She began to walk towards the town. And very shortly she stopped because she was exhausted. He was so heavy and so cold she could not go on. But he said, "Move on, Mary Culhane." And Mary Culhane, she moved on. Well, soon they were at the town where the houses were lined up, side by side, up and down the street. And he pointed to the first house. So she carried him up to the door. "Ah," he said, "I smell the stench of holy water. We cannot go in here." So she took him to the second house. "Ah, I smell the stench of holy water. We cannot go in here." So she took him to the third house. And when they got to that door, there is no holy water here. So she took him inside, and he pointed to a chair, and she set him down. And he said, "Now find me something to eat and to drink." And so Mary, she disappeared into the kitchen, and after a few minutes, she came out with a bowl of oatmeal. "And where's something to drink?" "I'm sorry," she said, "all I could find was dirty water." "Ah!" He flew into a rage. "Then get me a razor and a dish." And so she went to find these items, and when she brought them to him, he pointed to the stairs. He climbed on her back, and she took him up the stairs, and at the top of those stairs was a bedroom with 3 sleeping boys, brothers. And she took him in there, and he cut the fingers of each one of those boys, and the blood dripped into that dish. And with the first drop of blood, the warmth left their skin. And with the second, the flush left their cheeks. And with the third drop, they stopped breathing and became as cold and pale as the corpse himself. She carried him back down the stairs, and he said, "Get me 2 bowls and 2 spoons." And she did, and he mixed that blood and that oatmeal and divided it into 2 portions, and he said, "Now eat this." Mary had been wearing a kerchief around her hair, and she pulled it down around her neck. And as she pretended to eat that oatmeal, she really pushed it into the folds of that kerchief. Now he was too busy eating his to notice. And then soon he said, "Are you finished?" And she said yes, she was. "Then take me back to where you found me." So Mary was afraid he would smell that oatmeal and blood mix around her neck. So she picked up the bowls, took them into the kitchen so that no one would know they had been there. And she took off that kerchief, rolled it up, and she stuck it in the cupboard. She came back out, and he climbed onto her back, and she took him outside. He pointed in a different direction this time, a shortcut. And as they started through the fields, she asked him, "Is there any cure for those 3 boys?" "There is none now, for we have eaten it. But if there was any of that oatmeal mix left, and you were to put it in the mouths of those boys, they would be alive today and never have known of their deaths. But that can never happen now," he laughed. Well, they continued on, and pretty soon he pointed out a field where there was 3 stone heaps, and he told her, "There's buried gold under each of those stone heaps, but no one knows about it except for the dead." Now Mary was disturbed by this statement, for she knew she was not dead. Well, they continued on, and pretty soon there was the crow of a rooster. He said, "That is simply a dog barking, that is no rooster. Now hurry, Mary, you must move on." Well, Mary, she was so tired and so exhausted, she could not move any faster. She was moving at a snail's pace. And then she heard the rooster crow a second time. "That is no rooster, that is simply a lamb bleating for its mother. Now hurry, Mary, you must hurry." Soon they were at the graveyard, and then next to the grave. And he jumped down and he grabbed her by the arm and he said, "Now into the grave with you, Mary Culhane." And as he began to pull her in, the rooster crowed for the 3rd time, and that corpse, he fell back into the coffin. And Mary, she pushed the lid down as hard as she could, and she grabbed that blackthorn walking stick, and she headed for the home. When she got there, she was exhausted, and she laid that blackthorn walking stick on the hearth. And she fell into her bed. Well, mid-morning, her mother came in, and she said, "You lazy girl, here you're still sleeping, and our neighbor's sons have died. Get up, we must go to their wake." "Then go without me," she said, "for I am sick with weariness." And when her mother saw that she was as pale as the sheets, she left her there. Well, about noon, Mary got up, and she fixed herself a bite to eat, and she went on over to that wake. There were many people there, and she walked amongst them until she found the parents. And she went up to them and she said, "There is no need to be upset. No need to be upset? Our sons have died, and you say there's no need to be upset?" And Mary said, "What would you give if someone could bring them back to life? This is no time for such cruelty." And they turned to walk away. Mary said, "No, really," she said, "would you give that field with the 3 stone heaps if someone could bring your sons back to life?" "Well, we would give that and more, but no one can bring the dead back to the living." Mary said, "Put that in writing, that you would give me that field." Well, they took her for crazy, but they did what she asked. And then she asked everybody to clear out of the house. And she went into the kitchen and she got that oatmeal mix and a spoon, and she went up the stairs and she put a spoonful in the mouth of each of those boys, and with the first spoonful, the warmth came back to their skin. And with the second, the flush returned to their cheeks. And with the third, they were breathing but deep asleep. So she went back down and she had everyone come back in, and she told the parents, now you call your sons by their name. And as they did, they woke up. And they were amazed to see all the people there, and that wake turned into a joyful celebration. And Mary explained to everybody about the corpse and the oatmeal and the blood and all the things that happened, but she never mentioned the gold. And Mary got her field, and a few years later she dug up some of that gold and she built herself a house for her family and her friends to visit her. Mary lived a long and happy life, and she was always careful to leave holy water by the door. And she never again made oatmeal.